Well, hello there, pod people, and welcome to Champagne Social Butterflies, the podcast that is also now coming at you in vision on YouTube. And I am your host, stand-up comedian, sitting down, Donna Scott. And this used to be a much longer audio-only podcast called the Champagne... No, what was it called? It was too long. Lemonade Budget for Champagne Social Butterflies. But we're here, we're rebranded, and I've come back at you in this medium. So, why the break? Why the change? Why the relaunch? Why leopard print? Back in 2019, I got diagnosed with a massive abdominal tumour, and yeah, I'm fine. But it was a bit scary. And I kind of thought, you know what, I don't have much of a legacy. I want to start a podcast, so at least I've got something out there in the world. And I did that for pretty much 2 years. And, you know, I had my major surgery, and I survived, and here I am with the scars. Oh my God, you should see my scars. I look like a night dress case. Anyway, I am back. Welcome to my relaunch. We're all snazzy. We have got a lovely new logo made by Nikki with the butterflies on it, and they're having a lovely chat because this podcast has a new focus. Yes, I know me and focus don't actually go together very well because I have a slightly, dodgy eye. Now, I had the major surgery back in 2019 and that all went really, really well, and I've got a show out of it now, so it's not all bad, is it? Bit of trauma, it's a material, isn't it? Anyway, come and see me. My show is called Donna Scott, Weird Sense of Tumour. I know, that's a good title, isn't it? The Lemonade Budget for Champagne Social Butterflies, however, was a bit pants. So we've shortened it to Champagne Social Butterflies now. That's the royal we, I'm just saying the royal we already. Anyway, why Champagne Social Butterflies? Well, if you think about it, a butterfly is a beautiful creature. You see them in the garden and they go around from plant to plant, pollinating things. And a social butterfly is a person who makes lots of different kinds of friends in all different social circles. And they're called the social butterfly because they can flip from one to the other like a butterfly. And as a stand-up comedian, I found myself in this bucket quite a lot because I'm not only a stand-up comedian, I'm also a writer, an editor, a trainer. I don't like fitting in one category. And it strikes me here in 2022 that not only am I not alone in that, there are lots of creative people out there who do a number of different things and are good at numerous things, or they are really good at one thing, or they're known for that thing, and then they'll potter around and do something in the background until eventually they become good at that thing. And there's a lot of cross-pollination, see that word pollination? Going on between creative types, creative genres. And I find that my books and things kind of influence my stand-up kind of influences the projects I like to go for in terms of my work, and all the ideas that spring up, they feed each other. And I know you are like this too, but maybe you've been told that you should focus more, that it's no good spending 10,000 hours on one project but splitting it between a couple of different things because you won't get good at the one thing. Maybe you'll get quite good at two things. I don't think human beings are wired like that at all. Hence, this is the renewed focus of Champagne Social Butterflies. This is a creativity podcast. Whereas the other one was an aspirational podcast for hopeless people, I think in 2022 we are trying to have a little bit more hope and a little bit more inspiration rather than aspiration, and get there by our own means. We'll get to what we want to do under our own steam. And never mind what anybody else thinks, just do your thing. So that is my renewed focus. And I'm going to be speaking to lots of creatives who maybe are known for one thing and then become known for another thing, or who find that the kinds of things that they're into feed each other in a delicious, orgasmic way. So hopefully you'll get something out of this podcast now that it's in a visual medium. I have got an interview coming up with McDonnell, who was known as a stand-up comedian and is now getting pretty much better known, I would say, as an awesome writer of fantastic books. And we'll talk all about that and how they work with each other. In the meantime, this podcast was always a little bit of a diary as well, so I can tell you some of the things that I'm going to be up to in the coming weeks. Most importantly, next weekend I am going to be at EasterCon at Heathrow, which is a convention for science fiction, and it's got a bit of a literary bent to it, as have I, and I am going to be on a panel there called Podcasting After Year One. That's on Sunday. But I'm mostly looking forward to a book launch that's happening on Friday, and that is with my beloved Newcon Press. You know that Newcon are the publishers of my science fiction anthology series, Best of British Science Fiction. Yeah, I do that. And I'll be there at the launch at 5 p.m. on Friday. And that will be launching R.B. Kelly's On the Brink. You know R.B. Kelly? Oh, she was nominated for the Clark Award last year for The Edge of Heaven. She's so good. She's so good. And then there's Stuart Hodson. His book is called The Entropy of Loss, and that's getting some rave reviews already. So awesome. And I'm not allowed favourites, am I? But I'm really looking forward to the launch of Queen of Clouds by Neil Williamson, who is part of a writers group that I'm in, Northampton Science Fiction Writers Group, even though he lives in Glasgow. And he is also somebody with a bit of cross-pollination about him, because he is the Disappointed Skeptics Club. And you might even see a little clip of a video here of him being a zombie in one of his videos, so check them out. But I'm looking forward to Queen of Clouds because it's in the same kind of universe as his previous novel, The Moon King. It even got featured in BBC drama Hinterland. They had to ask permission, they put it on their coffee table and everything. It was like, really cool. I love it when you watch programmes and then you spot books by people that you either know or you've read. You go, I've read that! Oh yeah, I spotted Chris Beckett in The Cleaner. People said to me that it's a very brave thing to do to make a podcast. I don't think so. It's not brave making podcasts, it's not brave going on stage. I was very scared when I made my podcast because I didn't know what the future held. Major surgery was pretty scary. But, you know, I'm here. And I think now, with the news the way it is, the bravest comedian has to be Vladimir Zelensky. Huh? You've got to agree with that. I mean, there he is. The voice of Paddington, President of Ukraine, James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers look-alike. Brave guy, brave guy. He wins at brave stand-up comedian competition. But now that I'm making this podcast in this format, I hope you like it, and if you do, that would be great if you could follow me on YouTube. Subscribe is brilliant. Ring that bell. Just to mention my shows again, so I have a show coming up at the Lab in Northampton, which is a preview show ahead of Brighton Fringe, and so you'll be able to see Donna Scott, Weird Sense of Humour, on Sunday the 24th of April at 7:30, and that's at the Lab, Northampton. And I brought my friend Ishi Khan, who has a show, Love, Desires and Strawberries, into the evening as well, so come along, it's free. You don't only see my show, which is awesome, you're going to see Ishi's show, which is also awesome, and my comedy group, The Extraordinary Time Travelling Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is for kids. They are playing the Museum of Comedy on the 10th of April, Sunday. They are playing Brighton Fringe from the 28th of May to the 1st of June. And I'm at the Caxton Arms at Brighton Fringe on the 31st of May, doing Donna Scott, Weird Sense of Humour.
Ooh.
Yes, the little voice that says recordings in progress.
I know it's not as good as the one on what was it, StreamYard, where you test your speakers and goes, "This is the sound of StreamYard. Testing your speakers. Have a great show." Just this song. It's how in the zeitgeist I am. My favorite tune of the last 5 years is that woman singing that.
Oh,
Um,
I've never heard that.
yeah, it's when
I
you
just think
test
the
your
little
speakers.
tone.
When you test your speakers now in StreamYard, it does this thing where it does they have obviously recorded a little song. It's very clever because it puts the name of the product in your head. But yeah.
Welcome. I am joined by Queen McDonnell, aka CK McDonnell, author. Welcome to the newly renamed Champagne Social Butterflies podcast.
Oh, I didn't know there was a new. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was the lemonade budget for Champagne Social Butterflies, but as many people have pointed out over the time, too long. So this is the inaugural comeback podcast, as it were. New branding, new logo, new everything.
I
You're my
feel
first guest.
I feel truly honoured in a way I can't put words to, which is going to make this a terrible podcast.
I'm sure so, it's an exciting time for you now, isn't it? Because you have several new releases out, or new book birthdays and things. I got a notification from my Amazon, but yesterday, I think.
No, it's yeah, thank you. It's a bizarre thing where because basically most of my books they kind of all started off us doing them independently, and then the Strange Time series, which is the one is by C.K. McDonnell, is with Transworld, which is part of Penguin Random House, which is so it ends up like I ended up having 2 books come out in a month, and people are like, "Oh, you're writing very fast." You go, "Well, one of them was written a year ago. It's just that's the way these things work." But yeah, it is a bit. It's always a bit weird when they sort of come out close together like that. But that was just kind of happenstance. The greatest thing then is, and it's people mean it in a nice way, but if anyone's listening to this who does this, you need to stop doing it. Where I've had people regularly read the books on the day of release, like they literally read them that day, and then go, "Oh, it's great. When's the next one coming out?" You're like, "Just wrote that one. That one took ages. Don't like. It's not going to be next week. Just it takes a while."
Wait, I must say you're quite good at getting them out regularly, though, aren't you? Your books, that is.
Yes, I was going to. Well, to be honest, and the other meaning of that question is also applicable when I've had a few drinks. But yeah, no. I think I do sport fairly regularly, which I think is kind of important. The great thing about doing it yourself is you don't have to stick to a schedule. Because basically, if you do traditional publishing, great as it is in many ways, it's kind of it's a sort of one every year kind of schedule. Whereas with the other stuff, you can kind of do what you want. I mean, I basically, in 2020, we were supposed to go on holidays and stuff, like literally almost 2 years ago, exactly from when we're recording this. And as we all know, things started to go a bit wrong in 2020. And I ended up, because we had a holiday booked, then we were supposed to be going somewhere else, and I was supposed to take quite a big break, and because I just finished a book. And I ended up writing another book because we couldn't do any of that. So I ended up just picking a mad idea for a book. There was a spin-off of 2 characters from one of the other books, and just writing that book. And it was just basically, it is genuinely the maddest book I've ever written. Weirdly, it's kind of set in the more real world. Like the Stranger Times books are kind of paranormal. But the other books are technically crime thrillers. But the one, Welcome to Nowhere, that I wrote was the mad one. I basically just came up with this idea. I took the start of a short story I'd already written, and then just went, right, I'll just do the maddest thing I can for a laugh. And I ended up like them being in the middle of the desert and this sort of weird Mad Max thing where this guy was having a breakdown, but he paid all these people to be there with him. And it was all men, and there were a lot of leather and stuff. And they're like, going, is this guy having a very specific kind of breakdown? And it was all like, the idea I loved most of it was I came up with an alternative history museum where they had all these incredible things, that, like moments in history that these rich people had managed to buy. Like the Lewinsky dress and all these different things that were all sort of moments in history, which was a cool sort of weird little thing. But yeah, the advantage of being your own boss, which wasn't the question you asked, is I got to do that weird thing and just bring out a book nobody's expecting to happen and just have a go off on one, which was a lot of fun that way. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I myself, I'm juggling lots and lots of jobs myself, and part of the nature of my podcast is all about focus and sort of, but as something I'm not able to do very well is the focus and honing down into one thing. So I'm very much admiring anybody who has the focus to write an entire book over the time when we're all going a little bit crazy, especially. But another of the points of my podcast is to talk about influence and creative influence. So one set of creativity, like one talent and how it might influence another of your talents. And the reason I picked you as a guest is not only because I love your books, and yeah, I said to my husband, by the way, he wanted me to pass that on. We've been listening to this charming man,
Cool.
reading it as well, but listening to it, and so it's been amazing. But because when we first saw you, it was on stage. Oh gosh, I think it was when we were dating, so many years ago. You were in Birmingham. I think you may have been supporting Will Smith.
No, I wouldn't have been supporting Will Smith. The people I supported on tour was always Gary Delaney and Sarah Millican. And then was this in the Glee or anything? Or it might have been on the same. I don't think I've done many gigs with Will Smith.
I think it was the station.
God, that is a long. God, if it's that long ago, yeah, that might have been, because I haven't seen Will Smith but that is a long time ago now. Yeah, blimey, that might have been my first ever trip to Birmingham. You know.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
I went on to live there for a couple of years myself, and Gary had a flat together for a few years in Birmingham. Magical times.
Yeah. So yeah, you were primarily known as a stand-up for many years and quite popular on the circuit. Would I say?
Made a living back when that was a thing. Yeah.
So you're not doing stand-up anymore, as I say. You've been an author primarily for a few years.
Yeah, I actually, I sort of, the books started coming out in 2016. I think the first one came out, and they sort of started slowly enough, but they started kind of building a little bit, and I kind of realized I really enjoyed doing that, so I started leading into that a little bit more. And the way things sort of worked out, then I was kind of on the circuit for quite a long time, but then I was supporting Gary Delaney and Sarah Millican on tour, which are brilliant things to do, so much so that it's kind of hard to go back to circuit gigs, where you basically get used to people turning up to theatres to actually just watch what's on the stage and not chat to their friend. So yeah, they were kind of, so I ended up doing more and more of the supports, less and less of the sort of day-to-day circuit gigs. And then June, I think it was 2019, I retired. My last ever gig was the Stand in Glasgow, supporting Gary Delaney on his tour, which was a lovely way to finish it, because basically Gary had been my housemate. I met him on my 6th ever gig when I was about to give up. Like, I can literally, it's weird to say, I can remember the moment convincing myself to go to my 6th ever gig, because I was the first one went well, next 4 went terribly, and I was going to give up, but I went to one more just to do it. And I bonded with him at the back, spotting, it was a competition, spotting the stolen gags that the bloke who won it were doing. We were able to tell each other where they were from. And then me and Gary became good mates. We ended up sort of, when he gave up and I gave up, I ended up getting a TV writing gig, and he just was going full-time on stand-up. And we ended up living together in a terrible house, terrible apartment in Shepherd's Bush before moving to Birmingham, then Leamington Spa. And then we eventually parted ways when we both got women, essentially. But yeah, so but I don't know what. Sorry, I feel like I've rambled entirely on this question. But yes, I did live in Birmingham for quite some time along my many travels. But yeah, I gave up. That was the question. Sorry, yeah, but I gave up in 2019 basically because the books had really taken off by then. And I think weirdly, I got the traditional publishing deal for the Stranger Times in the week, if I remember rightly. Yeah, it came through the week I was retiring, which was weird. But it was, as I remember Gary at the time saying, that's probably a nod from the gods saying that you're doing the right thing. So yes.
Yeah. So I'm a person who has given up many times and then started again. I can't give it up. Let's just say 2019, that was very shortly before the pandemic. And that is a kind of no time. So it could be that you've only just done it really, so you could come back anytime, really. Yeah,
well, as Gary's thing was, this is probably the greatest piece of comedic timing you've ever had in your career, because you retired right before everyone else had to give it up anyway. But yeah, no, people always ask me about, you going to come, like, you come back, you get bored, you come back. And honestly, I don't. I mean, jinx touch wood. I think it's because it's not that I don't love stand-up. I absolutely do, and I love watching, and I'm really excited to go and see. I'm actually going to go see Gary and Sarah's tours, the new ones, the next couple of months, which I'm really excited about. But when I think of it, I just think, oh, it's a long time on the motorway. And then every time I was on the M6 recently, I just sort of went, oh, I can remember when this was like 4 times a week. It's just that's it. It's just the travel, and I'm sort of getting a bit older now, so I'm like, now my travel every day consists of, I'm currently sitting in my office at the back of my garden, and my travel consists of walking down the steps at the back of my garden and walking across the garden into my office. And to be honest, I'm fine with that. So
I like your
never
office.
say, yeah, I'll thanks. Yeah, I mean, never say never, but I think there's no immediate. I might get the urge to, I don't know, do an Edinburgh show or something, but I'll probably be so horribly undercooked if I do that. Having said that, I have done like live launch events. I did it my first live, because my first book came out, the first Strange Times book came out in the pandemic, which means I couldn't do all the stuff in bookshops and stuff where I should have been doing. So we got to do the first live author event. I got to go into bookshops and sign books and stuff only really last month, actually, yeah. And that was great. It was really exciting to do an event. And my friend Phil Mealy came in and we had a questions and answer session. It was great. So I kind of really enjoy that side of things. And as the wife said at the time, said, you can see you've probably missed being on stage just by how much you were excited to be answering questions and generally fooling about on stage with Phil a bit. So you never know, but I've no current plans to go back.
Okay, for now.
For now. It was more because I think, honestly, it was a focus thing. Because you say about focus, it was a focus thing where I just sort of felt like my focus is on the books, and I felt like my stand-up, I was a bit worried because I don't want to be the guy who turns up and does the same jokes 2 years after the last time you saw him. You know, especially if I'm supporting Gary and Sarah on tour and they're doing entirely a new hour and a half. So I think it was part of it was I just didn't want to feel like I was taking up space when I wasn't putting the effort in to stand up as much as I would have done normally. So that was it was a focus thing as much as anything, much as I enjoyed, you know, traveling around with my mates and having a great time.
That is, I'm going to say, like, this side of the pandemic, it's not as good because there's no money, there's no more money in it, and there's all the motorways are shut, so there's that. So you're probably best off. But I wanted to talk about the creative influence, you see. So how do you feel that having been a stand-up all this time has helped you, if it has helped you, with being an author?
I think it's helped in a couple of different ways. First off, the kind of creative side of it, because my books are, I mean, there is still humor in them. So it's a strong element of the books. I've talked before, but it's the truth. I remember my first book, we hired an editor. I was really lucky. I just basically looked out. I didn't know who the guy was. He's a gentleman called Scott Pack, who's actually quite a big figure in British publishing. He's kind of used to be the head guy at Waterstone and stuff. He now works as an independent editor and does various different things. He basically just kind of does stuff he likes.
I know who that is. Yes.
Yeah, he does, but it's great. But he does stuff that I kind of got him by accident. We sent him a sample. He was interested, so he agreed to do it. But his great note on A Man at One of Those Faces, which was my first ever book, was near the end, one of the final chapters. He said, "You see this joke here, and this joke, and this joke, and this joke." So I said, "Yeah, they're all good jokes. You need to lose all of them, because we've got to the point at the end of the finale." And he basically said, "You've built these characters up. We care about these characters. We care about what happens to them. You don't need to be putting jokes in there because they're in proper danger, and we want to be focused on what's happening." And I think what was interesting with that is it taught me that, because, to use a golf analogy, like being funny has always been the club I go to. That's my go-to thing in social situations and everything. Even when I was writing a book, it's the go-to thing. And his thing was, you've already been funny plenty of other places in the right way. You don't need it here. You need to trust the writing and take it all out, which he was absolutely right about. And it's the best note I ever got. And I've always been very conscious of it since. But I think generally, because I get annoyed, I know people hate this when I get asked a lot about how I write funny stuff. And the honest to God answer is I kind of don't. I have a board beside me here, just out of view on the screen when I'm chatting to you. And it's just the next Stranger Times book, which I'm sort of 2/3 of the way writing, all laid out. And everything on the board is just what happens. It's basically A to B. It's like this happens and this person sees this person. There isn't a joke on there. All I do is I lay out what's going to happen. And the funny comes from how I get from point A to point B, And that's just how my brain works. Like, I can't write it the straight way. I'll end up throwing a bit in to get myself, and it's not like I'm consciously doing it. It's just how my brain works. So I understand that. So I just let my brain, I don't worry about what's going to be funny. I just let my brain do what it's going to do. And generally it works out in that direction. So that was, but stand-up, I guess, just that it built it into my brain. I became a stand-up because I was the kind of bloke who had to be funny. That way, like, lots of people have to, you become a stand-up because you haven't got a fucking choice, because you're either that or you're the annoying bloke at office parties. So you end up becoming a stand-up because your brain works a certain way. And then obviously doing that, it's like if you're on drugs for 20 years and you give them up, your brain still has the sort of things, the certain habits emblazoned in it. It's like with stand-up, my brain just naturally does those things. It comes up with funny ideas in a certain way. So I guess stand-up trained my brain in that regard, and I just sort of let it go. So that's on the creative side of it, how it helped. On the other side of it, a couple of ways it helped in practical terms, where the fear of failure thing and the imposter syndrome and stuff, I had that a lot in stand-up. Almost everyone does. It's a natural thing to have. And then I was also writing TV, and I had that and stuff as well. The biggest thing I had when I started writing books is fairly early on, I managed to kind of get over the imposter syndrome thing that probably crippled me as a stand-up and stuff. And it's because I've been through it before. Like, I guess I managed to learn from the mistakes where I didn't second guess myself and I just trusted in what I could do. And that helped an awful lot, because I had the confidence that, and then people like the books, and there's a feedback loop where I'm very lucky where we have really super fans who, my wife is now working full time for our publishing company, and she answers all the emails every day, and she gets like 7 or 8 emails a day on average, just from people saying how much they like the books. Which she doesn't even show me anymore, because she's basically, her attitude was, if it looks like I'm having a particularly bad day, you need an ego boost, I'll send you a couple of the emails, but I'm not going to tell you people saying nice things about you, because you'd be insufferable. And she's dead right. So
you'd be like, what's the tally this week?
I don't need to be, no one needs that kind of, it's not healthy. But the other side of it as well is stand-up, just yourself, just makes you tougher. It just it gives you a thicker skin. Because, somebody saying, I mean, again, I'm generally very lucky where my views have largely been lovely. But somebody being a bit of a dick on Amazon or whatever, if I see that review, I've had blokes pounding the doors of fucking cubicles I was inside to tell me how crap I was. It's kind of, when you've gone through that, it's really hard to worry about somebody writing something on Amazon. So the great gift stand-up give me as well is that I'm not easy to intimidate, or, I'm not going to ruin my whole day because someone said something bad about me.
Yeah, so it's given you a tougher skin, stand-up
Yes.
has, and but it works differently, because yes, you can be funny, but you're not focused on you're focused on the story. But how are you finding with us, like, being able to sort of like compartmentalize the creative process from anything else you're doing in your life? Did you find that stand-up helped you do that with it being a writer?
I don't know I guess with stand-up, you did have to you get used to kind of, it doesn't matter what's happening, you have to put on a brave face and go out and do your stand-up and stuff. It does, certain things, it's interesting because writing, people always go, I wouldn't know how you'd write a book and stuff. And generally, I've written 13 of them now. And it's, you sort of, what helps is you've written, what makes writing the 13th book easier is you've written 12 before. So your brain goes, well, we've done this before, so just shut up and do it. But things like stand-up, it's kind of easy to do stand-up. I wouldn't say, you can turn it off stand-up when, like, I've done stand-up when I'm ill. I've done stand-up when, the stuff, that everyday life things have gone wrong or we've all had to deal with. Writing is a lot harder to do in that regard, because my father actually passed away end of January now, so only a couple of months ago now. And I wasn't lucky. He had a long life, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. He was about to be 85, and he'd been ill for quite some time. But even for that, for the last 2 months, I basically had to give up. For 2 months there, I didn't write because I just didn't have the focus for it. And it was interesting where in stand-up, I would have been doing it as normal because I would have been able to turn it off and, focus on that. Because when you have people there, that gives you focus. When it's just you in a room on your own, it's very hard to generate that focus if stuff's generally like that. So it's one of the great advantages of stand-up. It's probably more immediate, whereas writing, I think you do you can be pulled up. It's the first time it's happened to me. It's the first time I've had a break a couple of months, but it's just one of those things. But I guess I learned from that you have to be able to, you know, find a way of dealing with these things, I guess.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear about your father.
Oh, thank you.
So you're here in your office. Does the office help to inspire you? How would you have the inspiration around you? I see a lovely shed.
Yes, no, it's always a proper. It's not a shed. Excuse me. It's a proper bad. It's got glass doors and everything. No, it's actually a huge thing for me. I even when I was doing stand up and stuff before I'd ever written any books, when I was writing kids TV and all that, I discovered that I couldn't work well wherever I was living, in my house, in my flat, as it would have been at the time. And I actually generally had a thing where I had to get an office somewhere. And I had various offices around Manchester. I think it was only ever in Manchester I started getting offices. Yeah, I just basically realized at one point I couldn't work. So I had to go out and rent office space and spend a fair bit of money on it. But it was just, I just had to, I couldn't get myself focused. And then when we decided to move house, I decided if I got an office in the back of the garden, I think it'd be all right because it'd be far enough away from the house. And generally it has been, but this is my workplace. I come here. And it doesn't matter if it's 20 feet away from literally just off view there. There's a 20 feet away is the back doors of my house, and my wife's sitting in the kitchen because that's where she works. But it's still somewhere different. And I find it massively, the way my brain works, I have to force myself into certain things to focus. So I come down here and then I know I have to work. And even then I'm still messing about and stuff, but at least I'm getting closer to focusing. And especially now I actually technically don't write anymore. I now dictate. I've got this Dragon software that I basically talk to and do the whole book that way, despite the fact it doesn't understand my accent. And the only way it recognizes me saying the letter R is if I go R like a pirate. I still end up doing dictation, which I find is great. I get a lot more done. I also think it also helps me focus more because I'm talking. I don't know if that goes back to the stand-up thing or what have you, but I think it definitely helps me focus more because I'm saying it aloud. Yeah.
I must admit, even though I've just had I find it kind of difficult to do that because I know you're not the only author I know who uses Dragon, and some people that they can get so many books out because they're gonna I'm just talk this book through, and I'm like, well, I'm like,
But that's the thing. It's a weird. I honestly, I had friends who did it, and I remember thinking about it, and actually having a discussion with my wife, going, I can't even begin to think how I would do that. Like literally no idea. And then I started getting neck pains, and sort of going down my arm and stuff, and it was just from my neck being at a bad angle because I was writing and all that, and I didn't know how to type properly. And I just started testing it, and I went, oh. And I was really surprised how easy I found it, and now actually I do kind of naturally do it fairly easily, and it's made me way more productive, which is great. I mean, occasionally I will, for the odd day, I'll swap back to typing just if I'm in the mood to not hear my own voice. but most of what I've done on this recent book has been 90% dictation.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm going to take any tips from you, I might actually try that. Yeah.
It really is. I definitely would just try to do something small with it. But give it a go, because I was really shocked how easy it was when I got going. And I came from a place, like I said, where I thought it would be impossible.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm going to think about, because I do my time. I know that I've got give myself 3 months to finish this one book I'm on, and that's as well as my anthology commitments that I've already got going. So.
Yeah, it does. It's one of those things. If you can get it, it really will. Especially if you're not I'm a reasonably fast typist, but I tried to teach myself touch typing over Christmas, and I'm better, but I still haven't really got it right. And I also just got annoyed by where things are on the keyboard. Like, I don't know who it was, but somebody thought the semicolon was going to be a lot more important than it is, because it's way too prominent. Where the comma and the quote, single quote and double quote should be a lot closer. But yeah, I found myself getting annoyed by that, and so it is honestly, it's a life changer for me, and I would highly recommend giving it a go.
Okay, will do. So I will also ask you about some of the characters that I've seen cropping up in your books. I've seen a few familiar names, especially in this charming man which you're in at the moment. There's a certain person who crops up, who I know I've met and gigged with at festivals. and spend a lot of time drinking overnight with.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure you're talking about Cognito, but that was the last bit was the giveaway. Yeah, no, and let's be honest, because I've had characters that are accidentally named after comedians. Basically, I have a terrible memory, so to remember somebody's name, I will actually put in the name of somebody I know and then go back and change it later on. But in a couple of books, they slip through, which is why there's a couple of characters named after comedians that possibly shouldn't have been. Because I was one of those things where everyone goes, "Oh, is that a dig at him?" Is going, "Oh no, I just genuinely picked a name at random of someone I knew." But yeah, the Ian Gognito character, however, is in this Charming Man is much different. Where I kind of had an idea for a character. It was around the time of Cogs' death, God rest him, and it just sort of popped. I was telling my editor and my agent when I was having a meeting with them, or a couple of drinks. I was telling him, because Cogs just died, and I was telling him all the stories. And as we all know, Ian Gognito, everybody has a Gognito story. If you don't have a Gognito story, you were never on the comedy circuit. It's the most obvious. It's like the most obvious shibboleth moment of everything. That the password of any comic. If you ask them their Gognito story and they haven't got one, you go, okay, you're either very new or you're lying. But yeah, and he's also, I remember seeing somebody say about, I'm not sure if I ever saw him on stage, and then I remember someone else go and something that perfectly went, you haven't. You would remember. Because Gognito was better, even when it went badly, it was very memorable. But yeah, basically I had this idea for a character who was forced to tell the truth, like literally cursed to tell the truth. And then when I started thinking about Cogs, I came up with the idea that he would have to live on a boat for reasons that are explained in the story. And it just kind of became I just wanted it to be a nice homage to him. And me and Stephen Cogs weren't close, we knew each other, but I still think he was an incredible character. As everybody will tell you, he was brilliant. He could be annoying. He was the greatest man on earth. He was also, his own worst enemy, as he himself documented. But more than anything, he was a truly incredible. He was like, if you had to pick the spirit of the comedy circuit, it would have been him. And he wouldn't have turned up to accept the award. Yeah, so I sort of, that's the first time I've ever really kind of done it as a homage. And it was weird because I then contact his two sons and say, oh, by the way, I've written a character named after your father. Is that okay? And then like send them the book. And luckily they took it in the spirit it was intended. And it worked out okay that way. And thankfully the feedback from them has been lovely, and the feedback from people who knew him has been good as well. So yeah, it's sorry, I'm just going to text my wife to ask her to take the dog away. You can hear whining. I'm afraid the dog wants to come in because he's heard my voice now and he wants to come in and get.
I saw him in the background.
Oh, he's quite possibly popping his head up. Yeah, don't worry, he'll soon get a bit of chicken and forget all about it.
There's not a day goes by. I'm not training somebody when a cat's tail doesn't suddenly appear in my face. You know what I mean? That's the cat again. I'm recording this. Never mind. Have a video with a cat in it and a cat's bum hole.
If anyone heard any strange noises, that was my dog whining, not anything else, in case you're wondering.
I did notice that homage, and I thought it was very well done. So it's lovely. But of course, the Stranger Times series has a lot of supernatural elements to it. So the Strange Times, if anyone is not aware, it's a newspaper presided over by a more larger-than-life character called Bancroft. And we see it from the point of view of Hannah, who comes to work there. And she's kind of a little, not so much fresh behind the ears, but is that a phrase?
Wet behind the ears.
Wet behind the ears, with a fresh perspective. But she's like a recent divorcee, about to be divorcee from a well-to-do marriage, as it were, and trying to escape all of that. And what she comes to work with is the Stranger Times, which is a newspaper in a church, which it investigates the weird and the wonderful and the strange. And I particularly love the snippets that you put in the books for the articles.
Yeah, so, which are quite hard to write, by the way, because it's genuinely hard. Because thank you very much, it's basically the 40 Times kind of thing, a thing dedicated to, like, as you said, reporting the weird and wonderful around the world. So the articles kind of had to be sort of like those, but sort of silly. But the thing is, a lot of the news is so silly, even before, like, never mind the last couple of years. A lot of the news is so out there, you can't make something more ridiculous than it. So it actually becomes quite difficult to come up with something that's like, you can't make a pastiche of something funny, almost. So yeah, they're quite challenging. They're a lot of fun to do when you get them right, but you do have to keep. I actually had a weird thing with that where I tried to. Do you remember all the 5G panic where 5G was causing COVID and all that nonsense?
Yeah.
I tried to do a spoof of that. And I thought, I'll try to take basically a technological advance in like last couple of hundred years, whatever, and pretend at the time that they were saying this stuff was ridiculous. And I came up with trains, and I was trying to come up with funny stuff people thought trains were causing. And it turned out at the time when trains started being used, in the real world, people actually thought women couldn't go on them because their wombs would explode. Like that was a thing that people thought. They had all these, like, that was more wacky than the stuff I was coming up with, trying to come up with this sort of ridiculous thing, and it turned out that real life was more ridiculous than the stuff I could imagine.
Well, as somebody with an exploded womb, it happens more often than you think.
Yeah, but it's not a train related. It's not because of train travel, is my point. Anyway.
Who knows why I grew a 1 stone tumor? I could be in your
1 stone
thing. Yeah.
Sorry, I know this isn't the purpose of this podcast, but my God, really, God love you.
That was the original point of the podcast when I first started this. Yeah, I kind of thought, let's document myself because who knows what's going to happen. It was 3 months before I had the surgery once I discovered that I had this thing growing inside me. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing my show is called Weird Sense of Tumor.
Fair play. That is a good title. That is a very good title.
If anything, it's material. I mean, it's an awful lot of material, but
there are easier ways of getting material. But yeah, fair play to you. That's certainly a unique angle. Incredible.
Yeah. That was my womb. Exploded.
Yeah. Crikey.
Yeah. So there you go.
Don't really know what to say next.
Yeah. So it's inspired by the 40 times.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, and the Weekly World News, which was the one with the Bat Boy, the American one, which bizarrely they stopped making for some reason.
Is that the National Enquirer?
No, the National Enquirer is still going, but they're like their version of the Sun now. I think almost they're just sort of fairly sleazy. Whereas the Weekly World News was just bizarre stuff like. I mean, pick any animal, any famous person, and them having a child, and like anything like. Bat Boy was their favorite one. It was like Bat Boy was one they came up with. It was this kid which was half I don't know if he's half human or half bat, or had very strong bat-like characteristics. And then they were like, Bat Boy was meeting the president. Bat Boy had an affair with Hillary Clinton. Bat Boy was in space. Bat Boy was on the moon. Bat Boy was like, and it was all these things where they just did it, and it was just stuff they'd made up. I'm fascinated to find out more about that publication because I don't know where it ever came from, and then it disappeared again. But I'd imagine it's probably going back to people getting very, very stoned somewhere in America. I'd imagine that's something to do with it. I bet even money comes from San Francisco.
All
the
origin of all that.
Yes.
So anyway, because it's got sort of like a little bit of weirdness about it, a little bit of lycanthropy. Is it lycanthropy? Yeah, there's a bit of lycanthropy, I suppose. There's definitely vampires.
Yes.
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 And demons and all of that.
Yes.
You've got kind of like a definite sort of outre about it, which would very fit into the alternative kind of literary fiction. So I'm thinking, have you ever considered doing any conventions? Because I go to loads.
I have. I'd like to. I mean, it's one of these things where I think we'll probably see, because I know I'm going to Germany this year to do some book things and stuff. And I certainly would like to do conventions and stuff because I'd imagine that'd be great crack. I went to Comic-Con in, bizarrely on my honeymoon, went to Comic-Con in Florida. I think it was Orlando, somewhere down that way, where it was just on near where we were. And myself and the wife went, do you want to go? And then we're actually, because we hadn't got tickets, we were queuing up for like 3 hours. And like I was an hour in, I was going, let's just go. But my wife was like, no, we're here now. It's like, we're in the queue. We're staying in the queue. Because I was like, let's just leave. No, we're in the queue. And then we eventually got through it, went in. And it was fascinating. They are great places. I remember wandering around and seeing all they're all wonderful little, as you know yourself from doing them, all the what you call it, there's a better word for dressing up. Cosplay. There we go.
Yeah, lots of cosplay.
Yeah, all the cosplay and stuff, and then going around. And there's what's quite cool is they've got quite a lot of independent like artists and stuff who go and do all those sort of things. So yeah, I'd love to do them. I'd love to do them at some point. I know there's a big one in Manchester. So who knows? Who knows? Hopefully that'll be in my future.
Yeah, I must say I've never been to an actual Comic-Con. All the many years in which I've been doing things like this, I've never gone to a Comic-Con. They all seem to be timed when I'm doing other things. But yeah, this year I'm going to ChillaCon, which is a horror, the Dracula Society convention, and cool. I'm going to spend a day at EasterCon and Sci-Fi Weekender, FantasyCon, probably BristolCon as well. Lots of conventions. Cool.
Yeah, because there is a lot of them now, isn't there? I remember seeing a list recently because my friend was doing a list because he goes to a lot. And he did a list of the ones coming back, and you're like, wow, it's you could basically do one every weekend at least. I mean, there's more than one every week, most weekends at this point. I'd say, is there around the country?
Oh yeah. Another? Yeah. So let me think. Dave Langford's site is probably the best place to look if you want to find out whenever there's a convention. And there's one near you. There's probably this weekend might be ICFA weekend that we're talking right now. It's just like an academics convention, and yeah, and yeah, what's it called? Ansible. So Dave Langford's Ansible newsletter has all of the conventions on it.
Cool. I shall look it up at some point. I might just go along as a punter, but yeah, I do find stuff like that great. I find it just different weird stuff. I'm always interested in.
Yeah, that's what I do quite a lot of the time as well. But I'm like former chair of the British Science Fiction Association, and I'm a director now. So,
yeah, get you.
Keep my hand in. But yeah, so yeah, I think you would get down a storm. I must say, it's absolutely refreshing to have something come along with humour in it. Because I remember like when there was a panel at such a convention many years ago, and a prominent editor said, "Oh, we have Terry Pratchett, and we have Robert Rankin, and we're not looking for any more comedy writers." And myself and my husband, we just looked at each other and went, "Really? Because we love that, and we would love to read more." So yeah, I think in respect, you going out on your own to do that kind of thing. Had you ever thought about approaching a publisher in the first place, or had you always intended to go?
Yeah, we did look at we tried to get agents and stuff and all that, and we generally paid for feedback. Don't ever do that. Well, I mean, pay someone to read your book if they're actually advising you, but I paid an agent, which is a terrible idea. Don't do that. Proper agents don't do that. But this guy came back, and his feedback was that the first book, which was the crime book, was too funny and too Irish. And I remember
your feedback.
Yeah, that was the feedback. And I remember having this sort of weird conversation with him where I sort of paused and he went, "You have to be able to take criticism." And I went, "All right, the thing is, I don't accept either of those things are criticism because those two things pay for the apartment I'm currently sitting in. I don't understand what you think that's the problem with that." I will say there is, British publishing is honestly a little bit scared of funny in certain areas now. Richard Osman's books probably shifted the dynamic there again, because that's quite a sort of cozy crime novel, as they call it. And it is funny, so people have. I can remember being told that. So when I did the Stranger Times to do something different, because basically my other books, ironically, my other books are basically too successful that traditional publishing, there's no point in having a conversation. They would never give us any kind of deal that would make it sensible for us to take it. It'd be like literally, you've got a machine in the corner that pops out money. You're not going to sell it to somebody else because they offer you like, "I could just give you some money now." And you go, "Well, this thing just prints money. Why am I?" No. Because when you get your thing going yourself, which you can do, it's tricky, obviously, but it makes sense to keep it yourself. But we wanted to do something different. And we got quite a bit of interest. It was great. Weirdly, we got a few publishers interested over here, and it eventually got sorted out with deal, which we were very happy with. And we're working with Transworld, which is particularly good for me because that's Terry Pratchett's publisher. Who's my all-time idol. So now you're saying like we've got them, we're not looking for any more. Transworld are now looking for more. But it did take them a long time before they haven't. I mean, I think they were saying they literally haven't had a funny fantasy, which technically is what I qualify as, since Terry Pratchett. I think it was probably just because it was. But now there's been such a big gap that I guess it's kind of people aren't assuming this is something. But to go back to the thing, yeah, they are a little bit scared of funny in British publishing, but I think that's changing. Because it was one of those things where I don't know what, like, it was one of those things where I remember asking my agent going, is there some big publishing deal they gave out to someone for funny books before that it didn't work? Like, what is the thing that has caused this to be conventional wisdom? And he actually couldn't tell me. He was like, I can't recall anything. And he knows a lot of these things. But I think that's changing again. But yeah, there is and bizarrely, the Ben Aranovich books are funny, and they're great books, first and foremost. And they're big here, big in Germany. I'm sure, bizarrely, Ben Aranovich being big in Germany is why I got so much interest in Germany, which is interesting. I mean, he's a bit of a, I think it was, I honestly do, I've never asked anybody, but I got the impression, I know he's big enough in Germany that perhaps German publishers were like, oh, this kind of thing goes well here. So maybe they were seeing me as something in the same area. And the great thing about that is, if you do go self-publishing, people don't understand this, I think, is a big thing, is it doesn't close the door on other things, particularly if it goes well. If it goes badly, you can just put on a different name on it and then not tell people you've done it, and it's fine. Don't worry about it. But if it goes well, it's great. It's a positive boom, because as well, bar anything else, it shows people there's interest in your writing. You get to learn by writing so much. Like, if my first book had been traditionally published, I would probably now be maybe on my fourth or fifth book. I'd still be working as a stand-up, probably, almost certainly. They wouldn't see, whereas now I've got 13 books out. This is my career. I've written a lot more. I feel I've learned a lot from doing that process. As God, if you're not learning from that, you should stop. And then, traditional book. And the great thing about it is, people have this idea that traditional publishing is very inflexible in the way it does stuff and things, and in certain areas it might be, but I will say they've been very open to the fact that I already have a fan base, and they've been willing to let me do certain things the way I want to do them, because they understand that my fan base is there, like, and building a mailing list, which is a big thing of what I've got, like a pretty big mailing list of like 15 or 16,000 people now who are fans of the books. And that's a great thing to have for your career, because you literally send out an email and you can sell a couple of thousand books that day when a new book comes out. So yeah, you can take control of these things yourself. And I think traditional publishing, certainly the people I'm dealing with, have been good about that. They've understood, by and large, there's always a bit of give and take, that we are a hybrid author is what they call it, and it works really well for us.
And is it mainly through the behemoth that is Amazon?
The indie stuff, yeah. I mean, to be honest, the kind of disappointing thing when the first Strad book came out was all the bookshops were closed. So while they have online presences, they're not really the same, and it's very hard to compete with Amazon online. They are the behemoth. Like my audiobooks and stuff are wide. They're in lots of different places and stuff, but even then, most of it ends up being Audible, which is again Amazon. It's probably not the greatest thing for the industry that Amazon is as powerful as it is, but the other side of it is they have done a very good job in building that ecosystem. So it's a kind of, it makes me uneasy, but at the same time, I do appreciate Amazon have done. Without Amazon, I wouldn't have the career I've had. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one.
Okay, and I've probably kept you for long enough now, but to finish, what would be your top tips on honing your creativity?
On honing your creativity, there's that awful cliche that writers write. Now, that's one of those things you hear all the time, but I think the point is you kind of have to figure out what it means for you. Like in my circumstance, I think the worst thing for any creative is you've written the script to the book, and then you then spend 6 months, a year waiting for feedback. And that way where it's out and you're waiting for people to come back. And I've had that with sitcoms. I had sitcoms for how many sitcoms optioned and stuff over the years. It never went anywhere. And it can be soul destroying. So the biggest thing, when I say writers write, it's kind of like a shark, that sort of cliche that you have to keep moving. You really do. As a creative in anything, you have to be going on to the next thing. So what you do is you pour everything into the thing you're working on, and then you send it out into the world, whether that's publishing it as a book or sending it to agents or what have you, or scripts going out, and then you move on to the next thing. And I think in stand-up, my biggest mistake early on was I wasn't moving on more. I kept hanging on to material. And I think as a stand-up and all that, you have to grow by basically throwing stuff out and moving on. When I started pushing myself and doing the Edinburgh and doing the free shows, it was great for I think that was massive for my career, because I learned an awful lot about just doing it as well. Weirdly, one of the best things, not a creative thing as such, but I think it's an important piece of advice as well, is I was doing an Edinburgh show when I was in a paid venue. And I remember I had flyers and all that. And my agent at the time, Sean Almy, who was my live agent, is a great guy. And he said, you should go out and flyer for yourself. And I said, we got flyers doing it. He said, nobody be as good as you at doing it. Like, if you go out and get people in, you know, and I basically got over myself, which was the big thing. Loads of stand-ups in Edinburgh don't want to flyer for themselves because they're too cool. They want to be seen as successful. They don't want to be standing out, handing out flyers. It's like, well, you can look cool sitting in a bar waiting for 6 hours for your show to start when 4 people turn up, or you can stand outside for a couple of hours and actually be the bloke who walks on stage when there's people in the audience. So I got over it, and I'd rather be the second guy. And then I started flyering, and when I got people in, I got good at flyering for myself, and it gave me the confidence to kind of go, we're very bad in this part of the world at selling ourselves, in the good meaning of the word. We're very bad at sort of going, yeah, no, I am good at this. You come see me do it. I've written a book. It's good. You should come, you know. And I don't mean like just pushing it at random people, but Americans bizarrely are much better at that, of having the confidence to go for it. And I think in stand-up and stuff, I didn't. When I came to books, I managed to get myself to the point where I just went for it, because Edinburgh, those free shows and stuff, had taught me that if I actually push myself and go out there, people will respond. And I guess I learned, one of the biggest things I learned was then just pushing yourself and getting out of your own way. You really need to find a way of getting out of your own way. Stop blocking yourself creatively and in every other avenue, because people do. And that's the one thing I've learned in the last few years, is how to get out of my own way. And it's not the easiest thing to figure out, but if you do, it's probably the secret of a lot of successful people, I think.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you, Queen McDonnell.
Been a delight. Thank you.
Wasn't that a brilliant talk? Thank you, Queen, for that. And if you liked listening to that, that's awesome. Please do ring that bell, click that like. Next week, I will be interviewing the author S.J. Morden. Yes. See you next time. You have been listening to the Champagne Social Butterflies podcast, or watching it. And I have been Donna Scott. All the time.